every panelist here has a lot of experience in telecom and some very interesting stories, and I'll draw your attention to Fletcher for that. But what I wanted to ask about, I know everybody said, highlighting, environmental approvals were kind of an unexpected, I take it, and longer part of the build process than you may have expected. Is that improving? Go ahead and take it, Joe.
Sure. From an environmental perspective, what we have is, in our grant was 10 applications. So, although a bit of a surprise, we were moving forth with the environmental process for all 10 projects. Effectively, it isn't happening serially, but it all happened in parallel. So to me, it's a little, from ION's perspective, as a one-time recipient, it's kind of spilt milk in the sense that, hey, we've gotten our FONSI of no significant impact for all 10.
Fletcher, do you want to speak to that question?
Yeah. Like I said, we got a categorical exclusion. I think because we really didn't have anything other than dark fiber. So we were talking about hanging inert glass on existing poles, and we feel lucky about that. But it is clear that if they do something like this again, that they ought to come up with some way. I mean, I would hope that they would go back and look at all these applications, and if they go through all of them and see that they, dug through them all with a fine-tooth comb and didn't find any environmental problems, well, then they can probably do more categorical exclusions next time, confident that it will not be a problem. But I understand for some projects it's been a real issue.
Yeah. So we definitely, it's definitely been one of those showstoppers, basically. We have 1,100 routes that we're trying to build, and filing the immense amount of paperwork for each one of those routes has just been an incredible task. We thought that we would get a categorical exclusion, at least where we were in the right-of-way, existing right-of-way, but we didn't get that. So we've had to go back, and as I mentioned, we can be going down the same right-of-way we're already located in, but we can't trim a tree all of a sudden because of an environmental requirement that the RUS is putting on us. So it's something that RUS didn't recognize until we mentioned it to them a couple weeks ago, and they sort of sat there and scratched their head. But it's definitely been a huge challenge. We are starting to see movement in that area. We're starting to get some approvals, so the concern is going down, I guess, but up until now, it's been a real challenge.
I would hope to say, both from an RUS perspective and an NTIA BTOP perspective, that maybe the round 2 recipients could be the beneficiary of some of this learning that took place.
Okay, next question. I want everybody to appreciate that we have a diverse group of awardees. Fletcher's doing dark fiber, Joe's company's doing more traditional lit services like you can find on the Comptel show floor, and JT's doing, Windstream's doing last mile. Now, having said that, all of you went ahead and got your grants based on the fact that you proved in your projects. You did the research finding that there was demand there, that you could build it affordably in a way that would break even over time. You did that on your own. Having started your projects and having them been announced, were you at all surprised by some sources of demand that you just didn't know were there, that just showed up overnight, that you might not have looked at, you wouldn't have looked at, but then came to you later? And I'll start at the end with JT.
Okay. Probably the main thing that we've seen that's sort of a surprise has been the medical environment, home monitoring and that type of thing, where they're, the areas that we're building to are the rural, very rural areas, and just the ability of a doctor in a larger city to be able to monitor someone that lives out there without them having to drive an hour or whatever it takes to get to the hospital. That is becoming a real benefit that I don't think we really recognized when we were applying. And some other just ancillary benefits is with more people putting fiber out with these projects, we're starting to see where we can link in with other companies and do some other things that we just weren't expecting. So I'd say that's an overall stimulus impact that we weren't really expecting. So.
Thank you. Fletcher?
I would say that there were two. One is that something we might have anticipated but really didn't put much stock in is the possibility of bringing new industry to Maine through having that fiber network available. And it seems like there are a couple that have a fairly serious potential. These are very rural areas. Adding even one big new employer is a big deal. So that's really delightful. The other thing is, if you can recall the map, we run up, it's a big network, and we run up against the Canadian border. And for a variety of reasons, telecommunications hasn't really gone across that border much, not in a big way. And we're kind of on the way between Washington, New York, and Boston in Europe. For example, most of the traffic between Washington, New York, and Boston, and Europe goes under seas and lands in Nova Scotia at Halifax, where the signal's regenerated for the long shot across the North Atlantic. And this, though it's not what we set out to do, potentially creates an alternate path to the leg that at least goes under Halifax. So the leg that goes to Halifax, and alternate paths are good, and it looks like, I think most of the people in our industry in Maine kind of see things stopping, a hard stop at the border for traditional regulatory and political reasons. And it looks like this actually has value getting across the border to other places.
From an ION perspective, I wasn't too many huge surprises. We spent a lot of time pre-application reaching out economic development, industrial development, chambers, and spent a lot of time with the last mile service providers to kind of figure out the routes as well as the 125 community anchor institutions. So having done that on the front end, feel like very comfortable with what got laid out. Some, nervousness though after being told you were awarded the grant we had these conversations with these community anchor institutions. They told us what we wanted to hear, and the last mile service providers. Will they still be as excited after we got awarded the money? And I have to say, yes, that the community anchor institutions have been very receptive for the fiber, to show up, and as well as the economic development and industrial development authorities along the way. So we're kind of reassuring that we were kind of told on the front end, yes, we need you, and now that we got awarded the money, they still want us. So that's certainly a positive thing. And then I think the other thing in particularly upstate New York, in the more rural communities, I was a little surprised how much consolidation in the medical industry. We have a fair number of local community and county hospitals, and there's a lot of consolidation going on with that. And in so doing, the entity that's doing the acquisition has its own data center and wants to leverage, GigE pipes and big pipes to imaging et cetera, et cetera. So because of consolidation in these markets in terms of healthcare, a bit of surprise in terms of how big of pipes are needed.